Here we go. Okay, so I'm Paulette Murphy, Program Director for Washington Butterfly Association. We're a volunteer organization. You're welcome to join. It's easy to do from our website. We offer field trips and through the summer, and then programs through the rest of the year. And you're always welcome to join. So we welcome everybody who's here, even those from Iowa. So thank you for joining us. So Dr. Royce Bitzer is our speaker tonight, and as we put in the information about the meeting coming up, monarchs, what people think about with migrating butterflies here in North America, but Dr. Bitzer will present on those other migrant butterflies, the Red Admiral, Vanessa atalanta, and the painted lady, Vanessa cardui. Ever since his undergraduate days at Iowa State University, Royce has been fascinated by red admirals. He first encountered territorial males on campus, and this soon became a class project and a publication. Eventually, he observed red admirals for his PhD research, also at Iowa State. This was followed by a year in southeastern Arizona at the Southwestern Research Station in Portal, observing perching and territorial butterflies in a biome very different from Iowa. He then returned to Iowa State University to work on various research projects, both in natural areas and agricultural fields. These included ecological risk assessment field studies of ground beetles and other non-target insects in transgenic crops, as well as the daily phenology of dogwood flower visiting cerambicid beetles in Ledges State Park in central Iowa, and the seasonal phenology of carrion beetles in the Loess Hills of western Iowa. He's also been active with monarch conservation projects and monarch seasonal phenology research. So he's a really good person to look at both of these migrations. He's also interested in the ecology of the Middle East and has traveled to Israel, Jordan, and Egypt to experience the natural areas and agriculture of those nations. So that's quite a broad biography, Royce. So thank you so much for being here with us to talk about Vanessa migrations.
You're welcome. Oh, is that my cue to start?
I think it is.
Okay. All right, we will share a screen and get the right one. And I'm already in. Okay. First one will be tracking Red Admiral migration. And this is about how I got started again and the different things I do to look at it, approach this. Okay, again, how this all got started. I was a junior at Iowa State in 1977, looking for a project for my animal behavior class. So I was trying to watch blackbirds and frogs, but didn't get very much good data. That was really something I could work with for statistically. Then one April day, I was walking by Carver Hall when a red admiral flew up in my face. And I thought, oh, territorial behavior. I've heard of it before. And then I stopped to watch the butterfly again. Short time, about a minute later, a second one came in. And first one flew up at it. And then they went up in a big spiral up to the treetops. And one came back down and landed in the territory. So I was hooked at that point. So this led to my class project, and then a publication, and then to my graduate research. And I kept going with this research ever since. And then I started doing more, such as frequent surveys on the ISU campus. So I did and continue to do many late afternoon bike rides around campus, counting the butterflies in their territories. And also note things like relative size and wing wear, and if there's an intruder in, if they're interacting, and how many butterflies are in one territory, etc. But tends to be a seasonal pattern with two peaks sometimes, one in May and one in late June. Other times it's kind of all smoothed out into one. But in some years, there are a lot of butterflies. In other years, there weren't so many. And I'll show you some data from 2015 on. I've had some going back quite a bit before this, but these are a good example here. Quite a few, up to 100 on campus in 2015, 74 2016, 2017, a similar peak, somewhat 2018, somewhat reduced. That tends to be more of the average of 50 to 60. And 2019 had a really strong year with a peak of 157. 2020 down more like an average year. 2021 and especially 2022 are pretty low years. And about the only time I saw one during those years was when I was out looking at territories. Otherwise, I hardly saw any on the flowers. And last year picked up quite a bit again. It was a nice average year. Then 2024, we're going to see what happens. Again, some years there are a lot, others there weren't so many. So I'm looking at these numbers over the season and from year to year and wondering, does this depend on what's happening somewhere else? So this got me started on Red Admiral migration and distribution. I think 2001 was the first time I did this, and I went out to an open area to watch for migrants, and it wasn't long before I spotted them, and this is what I found. Springtime, they fly northward, got quite a few, and southward in the fall. This one is from spring 2012, and this one's from fall 2019. But there tends to be more migrating in the spring than there are in the fall, but you still pick them up both times of the season. This is a ground level too. And related to migration is wind flow and weather patterns. Warm, moist winds from the south, from the Gulf of Mexico, often carry the springtime red admirals northward. And here's a typical springtime incursion of warmer, moisture air coming in. This is a dew point map. And then migration differs by generation. Got 3 generations in Iowa. There's spring generation, mid-April to early June. These are the smaller size one, and they're definitely migratory. First summer generation, early June to late July, larger size. They're more stationary, but they can still move around locally. Second summer generation comes early August into September. These are also large ones, but then they stop being territorial late August to mid-September and then start migrating southward in September. And then I did some 3 years of mark recapture studies, and these revealed the differences in vigility between the spring generation and the summer.
So Royce, could you just explain vigility just for those of us who aren't so familiar with that word?
Okay, I kind of thought it might be self-explanatory with the, let me go back. I'm trying to go previous here. Okay, just means how mobile are they? Are they migratory, or they just tend to be stationary and stay in an area? So it's migratory versus stationary. So I wanted to find out what was happening elsewhere. So I got really curious, and I'd been on Dplex L with the Monarch site that Chip Taylor has. And I thought maybe, and I heard about Journey North, and I thought maybe I could start one of my own, something like this for Red Admirals. So I started the Red Admiral and Painted Lady research site. And later on in 2016, somebody suggested to me that I should put a project page on iNaturalist and pick up some more observations. And between the two of those, it's really picked up quite a bit. I get quite a bit of observers and have a lot of fun communicating with people and sharing ideas and observations and things like that. And this is the homepage of the Red Admiral and Painted Lady research site. This has been in existence since 2001. And this one is the Vanessa Migration Project. This is a pretty current screenshot of the page. Just had 12 more got added from southern Italy and Sicily. But this is pretty much how it looks right now. 1,746 total now observations, 103 members. Okay, this is from my original site, the vanessa.ent.iastate.edu. This is spring migration and distribution. These are all the data points from 2001 up to 2021. And you have blue for January, goes through green and gold during February, March, April, and then get yellow for May and then orange in June. So looks like they tend to come up the Mississippi Valley somewhat earlier than they do to the eastern US. And we'll get into that a little later too. And then I have fall migration and distribution. This is for Red Admiral, red for July through pink and purple to blue in December. So they're gradually heading both southward and somewhat perhaps southward here. There's not as many observations here because Red Admirals, they tend to like it more moist, so they're not that common in the Great Plains and the West, except along the Pacific coast. And we also have the issue of population density of people is much lower too. So that kind of comes into it. So now I wanted to take the next step. So I had two lines of evidence to support south-north followed by north-south migration. I got my own local observations and citizen science reports throughout North America. So now here's another powerful tool I wanted to try. And I got my chance in 2016, stable isotope analysis. And this tells you, where did the butterflies come from? Where were they born and grew up as caterpillars? Because caterpillars don't go very far from where they're born. But they have wing buds within the larva that will eventually become the wings of the adult. So these structures acquire the isotopic signature of the local water and food plants, and it gets retained in the wings of the adult. So when the butterfly migrates elsewhere, it carries evidence of its natal origin. Okay, the main isotope used is deuterium. It's hydrogen ion atom with a neutron. I also had carbon-13 and nitrogen-15, but tonight I'm going to focus on deuterium because that gives you the latitudinal direction, north-south. So as the way this works, as a moist air mass moves northward, rainwater with deuterium is heavier than ordinary water and falls out more readily. So as the air mass moves northward and it gets rained out, heavier water is increasingly depleted as the air moves northward. So regions farther north tend to receive rainfall that's more depleted in deuterium. And the way you measure this is as delta 2H, which is a degree of deuterium depletion relative to that of a standard water sample. Like we use standards in these to calibrate the values we obtain from the specimens. Okay, these values are negative, and the more negative the value, the more depleted the sample is in deuterium. So delta 2H can vary from -50 for those born farthest south to -120 or more negative for those born farthest north. And we're going to look at some data from 2016 Red Admirals. I've showing spring brood, first summer brood, and a little bit for the second summer brood. I'll probably want to analyze some more, so I'll probably add to this eventually. But the blue dots show values from -50 to -80. So they're coming from somewhere in the south. And these were migrants coming in. Then the red ones, -120, 90 to 120 from the upper Midwest and north. We tend to get local ones tend to be around -90 to 110 in that range. So the first summer brood is almost entirely local here. And then second summer brood, these were often local as well, but here was a surprise from August 13th, very blue. This was a -50. And I think there was a brief incursion from possibly West Texas, northern Mexico. And we looked at the wind flow patterns several days before that, and there was on high split, and there was a wind pattern that was could have carried them straight up from those locations to here. And something else interesting, no, the spring brood, mostly migrants, but here's two that have a local signature. So these might have actually overwintered here as pupae and then emerged in the spring. And the H grade is just the degree of wing wear. And early in the spring generation, they tend to be in pretty good shape, and then gradually they get more worn. And get the same trend with the summer generations as well. Okay, now we get forewing length versus date by deuterium values. And again, we said the small ones are the spring brood, and the larger ones are the summer brood, 2 summer broods. There's also a fall migratory generation here too. It's probably part of the same generation. Sorry. And you'll notice these are definitely smaller. Here's the 2 anomalous ones that might have overwintered. And then you get small ones in the spring generation persisting into the summer generation. So from mark recapture, I found these can live up to 2 months as adults. So what happens, interesting things that happen with the territorial behavior is these small ones pretty much have a pretty favorable time holding their territories. But once these big ones start coming out, the small ones tend to get kicked out. They can't outfly the big ones. So they'll either go more vagrant or they'll just sit in the territory on the edge of the territory. And then if the main occupant flies around, they don't fly up. But then they see an intruder coming in, over the edge of the territory, they'll try to get up to it first and before the main one comes in. So they still try to get a chance to mate. So some conclusions from this. Red admirals behave in curious and interesting ways over a broad range of spatial scales. The different types of behavior correlate with one another, such as the migration patterns and the changes in local population size. So you can study migration through several different approaches combined together. And there's great potential for anyone here to do studies and contribute observations. And if you have observers in different locations can contribute and share information. Like I've had several people who have done full season surveys and sent these to me. A number of people. So it looks pretty interesting. And I'd like to write some of those up and then try to compare with what I found. And for more information again, and at this point,
that's fabulous, Royce. We have a really great question in the chat that I'll present. It's a question about the regional specificity of the stable isotope analysis. So the question is, considering the weather patterns, that the deuterium drops out as the winds carry the rains to the north. Is deuterium depletion different for Iowa than it is on the West Coast? Since we have rain coming in from the Pacific Ocean, does that kind of change everything?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I have to look into that. If I remember, some of the water maps were pretty similar by latitude.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because the deuterium depletion really seems to depend on the flow of the winds and the water. So yeah, it's an interesting question.
Yeah, I'll have to look at the maps again more carefully.
Yeah, I would think too that there may be a difference between the deuterium analysis and the carbon 13 and 14 analysis, 14, 15 analysis, nitrogen. So that would be interesting to put all those together and see how that all worked out. That's an excellent question, Carolyn.
It's like that in itself could be a whole presentation if I went into all three of them.
I know it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, why don't you go on with the next part of your presentation? And if anybody does have a question, please put it in the chat. And then at the end of Royce's presentation, we'll have a completely open discussion, and you're welcome to just chime in. I just curate the questions by chat just to make sure that we can get through Royce's whole presentation for everyone in about an hour. So go ahead, Royce.
Okay. Share the next one. Okay. This is second part coming up. Okay, here I have highlights of the 2010 Red Admiral migration and my interpretation of it. Okay, I'm looking at two of what were several northward spring migratory waves that year in the upper Midwest and the East. Okay, first one to look at is Iowa from April 10th to 19th. And then from Chicago to Quebec, April 29th to May 5th. First, the Iowa sightings. I got quite a few reports of first one of the season, so I was able to make a really good map here. These arrows are showing where people actually observe migratory flight directions. There are a couple from going north and one going northeast. And So I put these ISO lines in here. This is April 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, and April 19th. So possibly northward movement, possibly some to the northeast as well, reflecting both of these arrows. And then we go to the eastern US and Canada, southern Canada. So it's April 29th to May 5th. And the lighter colored dots are earlier in the season. These tend to be, these are late April ones, and these little darker ones are observations from May. So let's start this. First got a report, 29th of April in the Chicago area, going northward. 30th started picking up more farther east, also moving northward. Then May 1st, northeast. That's when they started coming into southern Canada, Toronto area. 2nd of May. Then the 3rd. And then May 4th. Also had coming from the south, and also one group moving eastward. So there's an apparent motion here. So if you might think the butterflies are all moving northeastward, but you got all these observations here showing them coming from the south going north, except for this one. But so this motion is caused by something else. What's the relationship between the migration, appearance of the migration in your area, and the wind transport patterns? Okay, I had the spring migration wave, April 28th to May 6th. Dew point temperature, again, this is where the moist southerly wind flow is occurring. And they migrate northward ahead of a passing cold front. And as the front moves eastward, butterflies likewise stream up ahead of the front progressively farther eastward each day. And this apparent motion parallels the movement of the weather patterns. Let's let this run, 28th, 29th, 30th, 1st, 2nd of May, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. And when you get that weather pattern, and May 6th, notice a lot of cooler, drier arrows coming down, and this will often cause them to drop out and stop migrating in your area. And along that line or area, you could have quite a big population all of a sudden. Okay, this is actually a pretty frequent pattern for migrating insects in the eastern United States and southern Canada. So Elson Shields likewise observed this pattern for spring insect migrations. Typical range for spring arrivals is April 25th to May 10th. Most are finished migrating by June 1st, similar to Red Admirals. The migrants first come northward along the Mississippi Valley and then arrive later in regions farther east. And he says the reason for this is persistent cold air mass over New York to Hudson Bay typically delays the arrival of migrants farther to the east. Now, again, he found migrants travel in the southerly flow ahead of the cool front. A stalled front often results in considerable northward transport into a local area. Like you can have a surprisingly high buildup along a relatively narrow line if the front stalls out. Then looked at a little bit about fall return too. This is associated with different weather conditions. The adults, instead of launching ahead of a front, they launch behind it. It's cooler air, not so favorable, but the wind is very favorable to carry them south. You get a north wind. Like in the springtime, it's favorable both ways. You have warm, moist air, and the wind is flowing in the right direction that they want to go. So that's why I'm thinking maybe the spring migration might tend to be more pronounced than the fall migration, or more evident. Okay, look at yearly variation in abundance from the graphs I showed. This is Morton D.D. Hansen and this short paper about this. There's two conditions lead to a large and extensive spring migration year for red admirals. He was referring to the European population, but it's also very likely true for North America as well. First, you have a large overwintering population. This could be often due to wetter winter weather in the south. These are reproductive down south in Florida and South Texas, by the way. But this is followed by frequent moist southerly wind flow that carries the butterflies northward. So you can get strong wind flow that carries them far up into, possibly far up into Canada sometimes. And then there's been some years where we've had cold spring in Wisconsin, and for most of the spring, and that's all the farther they get, they hit that cold air and drop out, and they end up not seeing very many up in Minnesota and Wisconsin that year. So, sort of, again, questions or comments?
Yeah, we do have one I didn't pick up quite in time from the last section was about your age grade. Can you describe your age grade scale and whether it's a standard measurement? You talked about the spring broods, the age grade, the deterioration of the wings and all.
Okay, it's basically wing wear taken independently of damage. So I look at like how many scales are missing. It's starting to look pretty strong like this one. This would probably be a 0 or a 1, and it goes from 0 to 5. It's somewhat based on Karen Oberhauser's scale for monarchs, but I modified it somewhat for red admirals because they do tend to get much more worn than monarchs do. So like I think I started out with 1 through 5. 1 is pretty fresh, but then I ended up getting like newly emerged ones. So I ended up with calling them less than 1, being maybe a 0 or 0.5. They have really young ones have these white fringes on the wings, blue spots here, and they have strong antennal rings. Kind of see that here a little bit. So this one looks like a little bit faded out on the very edges, but this might be a 1. Now 2, I consider slightly worn. 3, somewhat worn is, and then 4 would be partly worn to worn, and then 5 would be really worn. Almost. And I've occasionally gone a little higher than 5 when there's one that's totally bare, but not very often. It's
okay. Well, thank you for going over that with us.
Okay.
Yeah, I see those blue spots. I didn't see them at first, but yeah, that's really lovely.
Yeah.
There's another question as to whether you have any idea why the population in 21 and 22 was fairly low. Does that have to do with overwintering populations or weather patterns, or does your data speak to that?
Well, I thinking possibly it might have to do with it being like a 3-year period of La Nina, and it didn't be dry in the south. But I have to go back and look at past years too and see if that pattern holds. Then,
Okay, great. Well, do you want to go on to your part 3 then, Royce?
okay, I have another comment about wing wear is actually when I did mark recapture, I would recapture some of them several times and then note different degrees of wing wear each time I caught them or spotted them. And then I'd figure out the number of days between those. And I actually came up with a curve that I can estimate absolute ages from those. So, ready to go to the next one. We are moving right along here. Okay, now I'm going to talk about painted ladies. Okay, here we go. So now I'm going to talk a little more about the Vanessa Migration Project itself and how I made use of it to track painted lady migrations with quite a bit of help from my naturalist too in 2019. So what is the Vanessa Migration Project? It's an online citizen science project. So for reporting North American butterflies of the genus Vanessa. And recently I've been getting quite a few observations from Europe too, and the Middle East. The interest really spread. So I'm taking those too. You've got 3 guys from Iran who contribute regularly. Anyway, get off track here. 4 species I look at: Red Admiral, painted lady, American lady, and West Coast lady. And the basic observation that you need is the precise location of the butterfly, where you saw it, and the date when you saw it. And besides that, you can also report things like that are relevant to the observation, such as local weather conditions, habitat, what the butterfly was doing, and how many you saw at the time. And I also put an observation field for the type of survey you're doing, whether it's just incidental or you're doing an actual survey of one type or another. And basically have 3 types of observations. Like to get the first of the season. This is parallel to Journey North, what they do with monarchs, and presence later in the season. It's always good to have follow-up observations. And then definite migrators. The reports of migrators can also include like the average flight direction and migration rate for number per unit time. So with these reports, I usually just look for a like kind of an average flight direction, like based on at least 5 or so going similar direction. But they also have the opportunity to contribute really detailed observations similar to what I've showed with the circular statistics graphs of migrants. So I've had a number of those sent to me too. That's really fun. So the website includes information on the butterflies and how to observe them. And I'm planning to add some more things pretty soon. There's some reporting forms and instructions, and also the database and the interactive map. And again, this is vanessa.int.iastate.edu. And okay, there's the main page again. And here are data for all 4 species. That's quite a distribution. Got it. And then this shows the date, shows the month of the year. And okay, I gotta be careful so I don't activate the link. Okay, besides the main website, we now have a second reporting site. And was David Capozzi from Toronto contacted me about my website, and he said, you should have a project page on my iNaturalist as well. You'll pick up quite a bit more. So this is what I created in spring of 2016. And with this, the observers can submit photos. In fact, they should with an iNaturalist observation. This catches observers who regularly share on iNaturalist. And I also can download these sightings to the main Vanessa Project website. So then I can have the color scale with those observations as well. And there is the project page once again. And I have 103 members right now. Goals of the project: monitoring Vanessa butterfly seasonal distribution and abundance, tracking their migrations. This often happens when I get several observers along a flight route. Somebody sees a migration, say down in Des Moines, and then I catch it in Ames the next day, and then Minneapolis 5 days later, and then up in Bemidji, Minnesota, northern Minnesota, 5 days after that. So I can get some really good tracks like that. And then relating the distribution and migrations to broad weather patterns, as I've somewhat summarized already. And then compare the year-to-year variation in their abundance and activity. And eventually, on monitoring effects of global climate change on their distribution and migration. And I think that's one thing I want to look at this spring. I want to do some analysis of like my 25 years of data or so. 23 years right now. Let's see if there's anything different going on. Last but not least, examine the relationship between local observations of butterflies, such as the territorial behavior, abundance and migration, and their broader activity on a continental scale. So here's a couple examples: 2017 and 2019 painted lady migrations. Okay, here we go. 2017. This one began in the American Southwest in the spring. Successive large generations and enormous eastward flights occurred in Wyoming, the Dakotas, Nebraska, western Minnesota, and southern Canada from June through August. And we had a gradual buildup in eastern Nebraska and Iowa in July and August. And then, about Labor Day weekend, first cool front came through. Wind starts blowing from the north, and all of a sudden there were just thousands, if not millions, of butterflies heading southward along a broad front in early September. This first wave continued to gradually fade during September, and I thought, oh, they're probably all about done now. And then I was pleasantly surprised, working out in the Science 2 prairie, And all of a sudden, I saw a second migration wave. All of a sudden, there were a lot more again. And these were moving both south and southwestward. And of this group, there are huge numbers reached Denver on October 3rd. And there was a big news story about this. The National Weather Service and the Denver airport caught this on their radar, and it made national news. Okay, back up a little bit to late summer. Butterflies had also moved eastward as far as the East Coast, eventually as far east as Newfoundland. So these butterflies then migrated southward in September and October, while persisting as long as late October in some northerly places. And this was a year when there was also an unusually late monarch migration in the eastern United States. And I think both species were held back by pretty strong southwesterly flow of warm air. So they didn't have very favorable winds for migration until that wind changed to the north finally. But one thing they can do if they're held up somewhere is they can hang around and nectar and build up their lipid reserves. So it's not a total loss. They just got more time to fuel up again. Okay, here's from my own website and map, January to March 2017. There's a view down here in Las Vegas, San Diego area. Okay, by April, they were getting up San Francisco on north. May, starting to move into Oregon. June, they're definitely up to British Columbia, Alberta. And there's also some eastward spread too. I didn't have a lot of observations coming in then. Okay. In July, they started building up, getting more evident to people. Get more people noticing them and reporting them. Also, and then into August, continuing. And here they're way far to the east. And then September, a lot of observations coming in and a lot of sightings, actually a pretty good sized population getting going. And then October, they're still around, but starting to move farther south. These are a little bit more of a fuchsia color. So these tend to be down. I'd have to redo this map a little bit and fade these out so it shows up a little better. But and then November, I got a few here, some purple. And then December. Here's again back in Las Vegas, San Francisco area along the coast, and then also down in Florida and South Texas. And then of course, when I saw these butterflies flying, I had to go out to the field and get some flight directions. And this was such a good day. Direction was nearly southward. There saw over 200 in 5.5 hours of watching, and I got 174 direction migration measured. The average was about 30 per hour, or one every 2 minutes, 32 per hour, crossing a 100-foot line. And the peak time was about 1:32 Central Standard, which would be 2:32 daylight time. That's shown on the right. And these are the type of statistics I use. Circular statistics. There's a program that's called Oriana, which does a really nice job of creating an analysis and graphics for these, which is where I got these made these circular graphs from this as well. And I have the mean direction, which I've put in red here, 171.8 degrees azimuth, and this is true versus magnetic north. It's true north. They get circular standard deviation, and then standard error of the mean, which gives you the amount of spread. You have 99 confidence intervals for the mean. So you have confidence that the actual mean of the population would be 95% chance that what you measured reflects a true mean. And then this is the Rayleigh test for significance. This is very highly significant and non-random for both especially for the direction and also the time period in which they were flying. So that's how you analyze these. Now, on to spring 2019, this was the big one. A very extensive outbreak associated with the fall 2018, winter 2019 El Nino event. The El Nino often results in unusually heavy winter rainfall in the desert Southwest. So the whole desert just greens up and bursts into bloom. And end up with a lot of food plants for painted ladies, which can feed on like 50 different food plants and 5 or 6 plant families. So whatever might be available in an area, they've probably got something they can eat. So it's probably why they're about the most migratory butterfly in the world. That they will breed large numbers of offspring, and then the eclosing adults migrate outwards from the source region. Okay, here's the jet stream circulation related to the precipitation patterns. In El Nino winter, late winter, you have low pressure here, the extended Pacific jet stream, and a storm track goes through the southwest and also into the south. So these areas wetter than normal. As opposed to La Nina, we have this blocking high pressure system, pushes the jet stream far to the north, and then it dips down. So southwest ends up being much drier than during an El Nino year. Okay, here we show sea surface temperature anomaly for strong El Nino, which is going on right now, versus a La Nina year in February 2021. And this you have sea surface temperature along the equator warmer than normal. This plume started out off the coast of Ecuador and Peru, and then gradually built up westward over the last 4, 5, or 6 months. Then La Nina, you get this pattern where the equatorial current is colder than normal. And on the next slide, I'll show here's a low pressure off the coast of California. So you can get storms moving in, also get atmospheric rivers more common, compared with the La Nina year where you have this blocking high pressure that can just persist for months, and it keeps any system from moving in to Southern California and the Southwest. That's what makes a difference from year to year. Okay, spring 2019. This migration began in Mexican state of Sonora, possibly also Sinaloa, even farther south, late January into early February. Mid-February into mid-March, it spread into southern California, southern Nevada, southwestern Arizona, and it tended to somewhat remain in that area during that period. But then after mid-March, all of a sudden they started moving northward towards San Francisco, Salinas, San Jose, Bakersfield. The movement at that time was mainly northward. The eastward spread was initially limited to Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. But then later in the spring, tended to get a kind of a cool period up in the Pacific Northwest. So they didn't move northward as fast, and then they started spreading more eastward more rapidly. And throughout the summer, they ended up going all the way through North America. Okay, here are a few map slides. These are from iNaturalist. There's January, first week of January, second, third week, fourth week of January into early February. They're still staying roughly in this area, spreading a little bit maybe. And they're just hanging out till even into early March. And then we go March 5th to 11th, starting to move north. And then they go up the coast after March 12th. And by the 25th, they're up into Oregon coast already. Then into April, there was this, they start spreading east. Looks like it's kind of cool at this time, so they stopped going north for a bit, for a week or two. And most of the movement was toward the east, as you see here. And I think we got them early, like in April. In a La Nina year, they might not show up till mid-August, like the last several years here. But if there's a big outbreak, they could show up in early as mid-April or early May. Quite a difference. And April 23rd to the 29th, they're definitely reaching eastern part of the country. And I believe there was, here to mention that besides the first generation in California, there was also a second outbreak down there as well. So they had enough food left over to sustain another generation in California without, they didn't all have to move out somewhere else to get food. There's quite a buildup here. Then here there's starting to spread into British Columbia and into Alberta and Saskatchewan. Now they're throughout the United States and into southeastern Canada. And that's what we had. And at that time, they definitely made the news. Here's an article that came out is from California. In the middle of a butterfly crisis, California sees a burst of painted ladies. And then this one over here was one that I actually wrote for Daily Coast. So enormous painted lady migration in California. And I wrote this about March 12th, just before the movement northward along the coast. And then conclusions from this, as with Red Admirals, painted ladies behave in interesting ways over a broad range of spatial scales. different types of behavior correlate with one another, such as the migration and changes in local population size. So again, there's a lot of opportunity for people to do studies and contribute observations, especially good if you have observers from different locations contributing and sharing information. And the way I eventually like to have the site go is have more communication between different observers besides me, not just me being the center point of all the communication. So I'm still trying to figure out how to do that. Like the iNaturalist format is potentially a good way to do that. There's a lot of room for people to comment as well as confirm observations. Then again, for more information. And that concludes my 3 presentations. But
So
I
you have a couple questions here, Royce, before you get on to your videos, which I think are really interesting. One is about temperature. It's clear that winds and moisture and temperature, all 3 play a role in whether you find the Vanessas. Do you have a sense of what the lowest temperature might be that you see active Vanessas?
Oh, I think like about 50 to 55 degrees when it's sunny. And we're like mid-60s when it's cloudy.
Okay. And then another question really, is the best way we can help you with your website to post observations on iNaturalist, or do you have other suggestions too?
Do you like either one? Either one is good.
Either directly on your website or on iNaturalist, is that what you
On the
suggest?
iNaturalist project page, yeah.
Okay, great.
And the project page on iNaturalist is where I'll actually see them. And this also has some observation fields you can fill in. There's like 11 different fields. Tells things like weather conditions, what type of survey you saw. Was this the first of the season, just presence of the butterfly, or did you actually see migrations? And there was flight direction, wind speed, bunch of different things you can add. Your survey type, whether it was just an incidental sighting or an organized survey of some sort, like a pollard walk, or a survey of territories like I do, or a bunch of different things that really help contribute additional information for the observation.
Okay, great. And did you have some a video that you wanted to show?
Let's see, I do. Let's see if I can bring them up here. Okay. I think I have to share a screen again. Okay, here it is. Okay, here's the Red Admiral migration, November 2015 through all the way through the end of 2016. And this shows the location of observations. This is from my own website. And the globe wobbles around a little bit, and what it's doing is it's centering on the centroid of the points of observation. So it's telling you about what the average location of the migration is at each point in time. So,
Okay, can you share your screen?
okay. See, can you see the screen?
Not yet, no.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay, ready to start this? Shrink that. Okay. Here's overwintering areas, actually South Texas and California coast. There, they're still hanging out. But here we go to first half of February. Now they're starting to diffuse outward. Now we have the spring migration going in March. Late March into April. We get the first ones in our area usually. Mid-April. Late April heading up toward, and then there's that May appearance in farther east. Then June, you start getting the end of the migration, still going far up into, quite a ways up into Canada. And then July, here's the summer population. And then fall migration looks like they're starting to spread more southward and also somewhat southwestward. And October, November, they're showing up back in Texas again. And there we go. And also a bunch along near San Francisco area. And then there we go.
Okay, well, this is a marvelous introduction to for many of us who aren't so familiar with the continental scale migrations of any species apart from the monarch. So this is great to have this talk and introduce us to this. So thank you so much, Royce.
Okay.
So let's see. Are you ready for some questions then?
See, I do have the painted lady video too.
Okay, well, let's go and show that.
Yeah, and then we can have a bunch of discussion.
Okay, great.
Okay, I have to go to here again. Okay. See, I think I need, let me stop this, back it up, share the screen. There we go. Okay, got it? Yep.
We see it.
Okay, I will start. This is the big 2019 one. This is something else. There's the winter outbreak starting. Still tending to hang around the Southwest quite a bit, but building up. And then we get to mid-March and they start moving north along the coast. Look at that. Looks like there's secondary population in Texas that's spreading out too. That's probably second generation in California, also spreading eastward. Definitely getting almost over the whole country by the end of May. And then they get quite a bit more northward as well into June. In July, we have the summer diffusion and continuing outbreaks. It's some of those lines of concentration look interesting too. Either side of the mountains. And purple, they're starting moving back southwestward again. And they get back to where they were usually. And that concludes My
Okay,
presentation.
thank you. Thank you so much, Royce. I know that Bob Pyle submitted a question because he didn't think he was going to be here tonight. And so, Bob, why don't you go ahead and ask your question. Now's the time for free discussion, so feel free to unmute and we'll just go ahead and chat. So, Bob, why don't you kick us off?
Thank you, Paul. Royce, what a wonderful talk and beautifully presented too. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
We're all excited by what you're doing. These species that fascinate us so much.
Yeah.
And I also want to say that your beautiful description of when you were first captivated by them, when the Red Admirals behaving territorially around the one tree, perfectly mirrored my own experience like that. That was the first butterfly that drew me in as a lepidopterist. Bunch of them around the base of a big cottonwood tree on my old ditch in Colorado. And that was 64 years ago. And all due to Red Admiral. So thank you for bringing me back to that memory. But I've got a question for you that has concerned me a lot over the years as a biogeographer. Biogeographers have a problem with animals or plants being moved around to places that they have not arrived under their own steam, and then detected in those places. And sometimes that can bias the results of our understanding of their natural movements. There's been a lot of discussion about this, and I've opined about it probably ad nauseum. But as we all know, painted ladies have essentially replaced monarchs in schools as the teaching butterfly for life history, although it's not a very good lesson because there they are feeding on a brown auger instead of plants. Nonetheless, it's often the only way that kids get butterflies in schools these days, and it probably has some retrieving merit. However, because of the industrial painted lady commerce, which is large, tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of monarchs painted ladies are released in places where they probably didn't get on their own, certainly within their natural range, but in awkward times and awkward places often. Now, that's one thing. But the second thing is that Wayne Whaling, a former colleague of ours here in Washington Butterflies, is in charge of the rules for butterfly movement and transport and release across state lines for APHIS in USDA. And against the advice of some of his colleagues and biogeographers in general, Wayne decided some years ago, not too long ago, to add all of the Vanessas, Virginiensis and Atalanta and Annabella, not Kamehameha in Hawaii, to the monarch as being butterflies that are permitted to be reared elsewhere and transported and released across state lines. Now, we don't permit that currently in Washington and Oregon, but elsewhere this happens. So my question to you is my concern misplaced simply because of the numbers involved or your statistics are able to weed out the outliers? Or do you share my concerns that shifting Vanessas around willy-nilly on a commercial or educational basis could bias or pervert the database in any significant way, in any way that might alter our perception of their natural movements, particularly in the years when the movements are not like 2019, but when there are relatively few records. If 10,000 are released here or 500 over there, and they happen to be seen, as they will be more and more with iNaturalist, is the potential here for controverting the database and our understanding of these butterflies because of their movement and release. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm thinking you're pretty much got the ideas. Probably during a really big year, everything's pretty saturated, but I'm really concerned during the low years, what's going on, and I don't, possibly you might have some big release somewhere out east where they haven't arrived yet, and this spreads out somewhat and people see it and looks like you have a little island popping up here.
Right.
And that could definitely be concerning.
Thank
And
you.
I've even had a few observers report them. And then they said, oh, there was a school release in our area.
Exactly. Yes,
So
for sure.
I think you should pull this observation.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to know it's not just me.
No, definitely not.
Good. Appreciate
So,
that.
May I
So
add this?
I'm kind of wondering what to do about this because it could be like a whole panel discussion.
Well, it's a big issue, and I know
Mhm.
Paul Cherubini's here. We've discussed it with respect to monarchs and so on. And I don't know. I think all of us discussing it in a civil way and maybe working at the state level. We
Yeah.
have convinced our state regulators in Washington and Oregon not to permit the import and release of butterflies from out of state. It's a regulatory thing rather than part of the revised code of Washington or Oregon, so it could change overnight. But
Yeah.
so far, that's diminished the threat of bad data, what I call bad data, for these butterflies in our states. Maybe that can be done on a state level. However, as long as the federal permit is still given, which USDA is determined to do for now, states often are confused which way to go. So I don't know. I don't know what to do about it, but it does have the potential, I think, for bad data in, bad data out.
I think I've had a few teachers contacted me.
Yes,
Should I
I have
release
too. I've
the-
had teachers contact me and say, should we be doing this? And
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fine to rear them, but just don't release
No,
them.
it isn't.
We got the
It
adult.
is not,
Gary, did you have something to add?
absolutely. Some time ago, well, all my career with, optical studies of butterflies, I sharpened my tool using Vanessa from Carolina Biologicals. And in the 80s, when I was really into it, those were pretty good butterflies, and they had nice orange eyes, lots of visual pigment. Then later, maybe 2013 or something like that, I had a visitor that wanted to learn my stuff, and so I got a bunch of Carolina Biologicals Vanessa and discovered that they were partially blind. So I did, I got a bunch of them and I measured how variable that was. None of them were up to standards of a wild type. Some of them were legally blind, just no visual pigment.
Oh.
More recently, I've been working with Geraldo Talavera from Spain on migrations of Vanessa cardui over there. And I had some visitors from the University of Washington that wanted to write an article about me, and they wanted to interview me, but I thought, no, they got to see this for themselves. So I got some more Carolina Biologicals, and I wanted to know how bad they were now compared to the 80s. Bad. Also, back in 2013, there may be 5 or 6 suppliers in North America. I got butterflies from them all, same problem. The problem is the gamish they feed the butterflies are lacking carotenoids. Carotenoids are essential for developing the chromophore of the visual pigment. They need it for vision. So that's why they're legally blind. Lately, like the last month, I've been, my research, I've been studying how the ommatidial array, all those little facets, how they're organized to see what they need to see. So I thought, well, I'm going to do that with Vanessa cardui. And I happened to be going to California looking for epidemias, but I came across a really nice Vanessa zipping by cardui. So I took it home. I thought, well, let's see what a wild type looks like. Beautiful orange eyes. And the array is just beautifully organized for flight, all aligned, all great for flight. So beautifully arranged, and I measured that. So I took one of the blue-eyed Carolina, the blind one, and measured its arrays, and it was totally disorganized. So recently, I mean, like the last couple of months, I've learned that carotenoid deprivation not only ruins its ability to see, at high sensitivity, it also screws up the organization of their eyes for flight. So something going on with releasing those bad ones into the environment is that I don't know how they can even navigate with eyes like that. But I don't know if they can pass that on genetically, but it sure concerns me. Those are real sickies. And none of them are any good from any of the commercial suppliers that I've seen.
One thing, those might get selected out pretty quickly.
You hope.
Not persist, but you hope it.
We don't know, do we?
Okay, John Pelham, you had some comments you wanted to make. Do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Hey, boys, first of all, that was great. I'm excited. I was eating it up. Okay, I'll try to get 2 or 4, questions to you. First off, I'm going to send you all our records, so like you're going to have that. You're going to love that.
Oh,
Second, I was delighted to hear that, Red Admirals might occasionally make it through a winter in Iowa, because they do here with some regularity. We have, just under 20 records of Red Admirals from November to March in Washington. So they can occasionally. It's not surprising to me that they do occasionally, even in Iowa. Right. Number
Especially
3,
with climate change. Especially with climate change happening.
Right. Number 3 is something you might be interested in. The inbound painted ladies, which are really obvious up here because they're little red. We have a grading scale that's slightly different than yours. A condition of the wings. Our 0 is we call spanky. Okay, so 5 and 6 is like beater. And like I'm not sure I could. Yeah, right. It's, you got the idea, but so the inbounds are all beaters and they're all dinky, but they will lay eggs on lupin. Okay, and I mean a lot of eggs on a lot of lupin. All right, and they make their nests and everything. First time I saw this, I was just a puppy, and I was like, "What is going on?" Nobody listed lupin as a food plant. Well, they don't use it after that. The inbound, they will not eat lupin in the second generation. So like if you get larvae in the middle of the summer, try to feed them lupin, they're looking at you funny. All right. So I don't know if you even knew about that, but that's been corroborated by people like Dave Nunnally and others. And last, in Seattle, when I was growing up, we had lots of painted ladies. If there was a big year, then it was a big year in Seattle. Now, maybe you don't know this, but in Seattle, a big year for butterflies is the big deal because we only have like 5. All right. But now this is no longer true because people have taken due diligence to wipe out the non-native Canadian thistle, which used to grow around every little light post and every little waste area. Now it's considered a pest species, and it's really hard to find sometimes, right? And so, like, they're not doing so well in the city. They do fine outside, but that's it. I'm out. Drop the mic.
Just a footnote to that, John, about the overwintering. We also have one record in January here in Clatsop County, Oregon, where I am tonight, of Vanessa cardui, painted lady. And so there's seems to be at least one overwintering record here at the mouth of the Columbia River, pretty mild place. And the other one is that my late wife Tia found a Vanessa virginiensis, what we used to call hunter's butterfly or the American painted lady, in Wahkiakum County, Washington, just across the river from here in February. I corroborated it the next day. So even the other Vanessas occasionally pass the winter up here. And as you said, I strongly suspect that trend to increase as things warm up.
Well, that's wonderful to, John, that you're willing to share your data, because it sounds like Royce could really augment his data set enormously. Melanie, do you want to weigh in on that too?
Which what?
Melanie,
Oh,
Ooh, okay.
you're muted, Melanie.
There we go. No, my question was, should we send you old data? And, how far back would you, as far back as we have it?
Yeah, I'd appreciate it. Yeah. Past data is really good too. It fill in a lot of things that there are a few years where I didn't get very much, like 2011 or something, partly because my website was down and it was a low year too, but
Great.
Okay, and Mark, you also had a question. Do you want to go ahead and ask it?
Oh, I don't know. It's that important. Way back when you started, you were talking about the Red Admirals and that you measured the forewings. Did you actually measure those? Is there a certain way that we should measure wings of butterflies? Or was it just a general observation that these are smaller than these are?
oh, I actually did. When I did mark recapture study, I actually measured them, measured the forewings. And yeah, I could go from the base of the shoulder to the tip of the forewing. I have to give you a little more
the
detail on
farthest
that,
point,
but
the longest distance, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
Like measuring fish. Okay.
yeah.
All right. Thank you.
And what kind of variation did you see, Royce?
Oh, there's definitely a difference. I think the wing lengths were like from average 24 to 30 millimeters for the spring generation, then for summer generation get more like 27, 28 up to much as 34 for the really biggest ones, 33 or 34.
Is that because of how well they eat as caterpillars?
Yeah, not quite sure why. It's some hormonal thing, and I
More research to be done.
think we tried rearing some in cold conditions versus warm conditions to see if there would be a difference in summer butterflies, but we couldn't find any difference. They still all came out large. So I'm not quite sure why. Probably some research on this somewhere.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
I got a little comment if nobody jumps in, that just that Royce might be interested, and some of you might not know this, but Royce, have you ever seen all four Vanessas in the same place at the same time?
Let's see. No, I haven't.
I'm not sure.
I've seen three, obviously.
Yeah, you wouldn't get Annabella, of course, where you are, but
When I was in Arizona, I saw Annabella and cardui and one atalanta.
okay.
So
Well,
I've seen three at a time.
I'm just crowing that
Yeah.
in 2018, I was doing a Washington butterfly big year, and I happened to go up to Steptoe Butte in the Palouse area of Washington. It's an old volcanic plug that a lot of us go to. It's a great butterfly hilltopping place with about 700 or 800 acres of good shortgrass prairie preserve around it, whereas almost everything is wheat there for many, many miles. And so good butterfly diversity there, and you get great hilltopping of Oregon swallowtails and a couple of fritillaries and lots of things. But that afternoon, there were all four of them. A couple of painted ladies. That's the one that showed up last, and a number of Red Admirals, and then Annabella. Never an easy butterfly to see in Washington. Never to be expected. And Virginiensis even less so. It's our rarest painted lady here, and it showed up too. That was that was a big deal. So that was lots of fun.
Oh,
And just wanted everybody to know, if you ever want to try to see all four in one time, you try Steptoe Butte.
Do you remember what
You didn't
time of
have
year
to go to
that
the Big
was?
Island to see Kamehameha.
Do you remember what time of year that was, Bob?
Yeah, was it, John, was it early August?
Yeah, early August.
Yeah,
hmm.
yeah. No, wait, take it back, because my big year was over on my birthday, because I started it on my birthday in 2017 when I took the first voucher specimen of the variegated fritillary in Washington, and I finished on July 18th of 2018. So it was, I think, in the middle week of July. Yeah, it was about July 15th. I was up on Steptoe, and that's when it occurred. Yeah.
Some amazing work.
Was it Sheridan's?
Well, that's a lovely, lovely thought to be able to see all four Vanessas. Yeah.
See, there's something else interesting that I'd like to mention is when I first observing migrations of Red Admiral in the early 2000s, like every fifth or sixth or eighth one would be a Vanessa, an American lady,
Oh.
as well, migrating with Red Admirals.
Mhm.
But now I've hardly see any American ladies at all. So I'm not sure what's going on. They're pretty common out in the Carolinas, and that seems to be the most common one out there. And they usually don't see their first painted lady until like at least August.
In the Carolinas.
Yeah, takes a while for them to get out there, unless it's a really big year.
That's
Yeah.
weird.
But
Kevin, are there any other comments or questions?
No.
Have people done more of the radar photography of the painted lady clouds? That was such an eye opener to so many of us who didn't think there was very much of a southerly return. And a lot of our field guides, things we've written about them are simply patently mistaken, because once you get those pictures, it was clear that there are a great many more painted ladies going south than we had
yeah.
thought all of our lives.
Yeah.
Has there been more of that radar work done?
Oh, I tried saving a bunch of radar maps for a while.
From North America?
Yeah. So I was kind of looking for stuff, but I wasn't sure how to interpret them, but I've got several years of them.
Now, we have some Europeans with us tonight. I think there has been some great radar work on Vanessa in North Africa and in Southern Europe, has there not?
Yes. I think there was Stefanescu was one of the authors.
Anybody weigh on that? I've read at least one paper on that topic of radar, looking at returns by radar, but maybe someone else has some information that they can contribute.
I have no information, but I was curious, do we find these in South America? Sounds like they're everywhere. That's the only country that hasn't been mentioned.
Are you on mute?
Yeah, gotten several observations from Curacao, which is island off the northern coast of South America. Painted ladies showing up.
There are Vanessa counterparts in different parts of the world. There's an endemic in New Zealand, I believe. There's Vanessa indica over much of the subcontinent. Looks quite a bit like a Red Admiral, whatever you want to call it. I don't care. Who cares? They're about to change all the birds' names, and you know what? Who cares? So just so we know what we're all talking about, that's the only thing that matters. And then there's a couple other Vanessas here and there. Actually, you know, our West Coast lady, and this is a great story, was called Vanessa Carye, Carye, in all the earlier books, Holland and so on. And it was Bill Field, wrote The Butterflies of Kansas. He was a curator of butterflies at the Smithsonian. And in the 70s, I believe, he was studying them, and he elevated the subgenus Cynthia to generic level for a while. But he determined that cardui was different from the North American species, which left it without a name. And so he got to give a North American butterfly a brand new species name in his revision, which is an unusual position to be in when it isn't even a new species. And so he named it for his brand new daughter, Annabella. And that's why it's called Vanessa Annabella. And its subgenus is Cynthia. So the butterfly's full name is Vanessa Cynthia Annabella. Isn't that lovely?
Except
There
it's
are
not
other,
Cynthia.
there are other Vanessas, but I don't know about South America.
Hey, I got to tell you something, Bob. You know, it's no longer Cynthia, and in fact, Cynthia is a synonym of Vanessa. And Nick Christian elevated Prophieldia to subgenus rank, and Annabella and Carrier are in Prophieldia. So it's Vanessa Prophieldia Annabella. How about that?
That's pretty cool because her whole name is there then. Annabella
Uh-huh.
Field is her name, and she's now Prophieldia. That's pretty cool. Thanks, John.
Hey, it's what I do.
Wonderful talk, Royce.
Okay.
Yeah, it was great. Really great. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely appreciate more observations from the Pacific Northwest.
It's so good when we have good science on here, as we often have. And it's so good to see it presented so well so we can all understand it. I speak of myself.
Yeah, you did a really nice job, Royce, of presenting things so that even newbies like me can understand it, and people like experts like Bob and John and Melanie and Dave Nunnally can get something out of it too. So really appreciate your attentiveness to that.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Royce. Really appreciate your having us. Appreciate you joining us tonight. And I think your colleagues from Iowa as well. I was paying so much attention to other things. I couldn't see how many joined us, but you all are welcome at any time to join our WBA talks. We meet the first Wednesday of every month. And next month, January, we're going to be having our holiday party. So it won't be an early January meeting. I think it'll be the 20th, but we'll be putting that information out. And it'll be a lot of socializing, a lot of chatting, just connecting about what we've seen in the past year and what we're hoping to see in the coming year. So we'll look forward to seeing you then. And thank you again, and good night, everybody.
Oh,
All right.
good night.
Good night.